Well, good evening and welcome. Welcome, my sexy little podcasty bastards, to an impromptu new episode of Thompsin Other Disappointments. This one is it's a fuck this week episode, which, if you're unfamiliar with these ones, it's just me talking to myself. There's no guest, and I'm basically just going through the news of the week, and you know what? We're going to try and make sense of the senseless. Or quite often senseless. Sometimes it makes sense, and there's a glimmer of hope, and like we might at some stage return to something kind of resembling normal, but most of the time, not so much. Big news today I read this morning was Suella Braverman, the Attorney General, who defended the breaking of international law with Brexit. I don't know how au fait some of you are or are not in terms of like the history of Brexit and her name and her sort of career trajectory and all that, but she defended the breaking of international law when the government wanted to break it in a, do you remember, limited and specific way? That was the way that they worded it. They said, yeah, look, this will break international law. We concede that. But only in a limited and specific way. And so cue, obviously, tens of thousands of memes of people, saying like, well, yeah, I broke the speed limit, but it's only in a limited and specific way. And there were people like me and maybe you on Twitter saying, well, this is all very well and good if you are breaking a law to reach your political goals. But is there no forethought here in terms of the repercussions? Like, of what this could spell for, not just for this government, I'd celebrate it if it was just this government. If it was like, if it was limited to just, this could make things really awkward for the Johnson administration in, 2 weeks or 4 months or a year's time when they need to rely on an international law. If it was just that, I would just sit back with the fucking popcorn, wanking myself silly, certain that they were going to get themselves into that sort of problem where they would say, well, you can't do that because it's international law. And then somebody quite rightly turns around and goes, well, hang on a second. You fucking flushed international law down the toilet when you were trying to get your Brexit shit over the line. So by all means, go fuck yourself. If it was just down to the Johnson administration, I would be celebrating it. But no, it's Britain as a whole. It is the reputation of the United Kingdom flushed down the toilet. In terms of like, who could take the UK seriously after we've broken international law and like broken domestic law, arguably by lying to the Queen to prorogue unnecessarily just to get the shit over the line? Like, no, we have no credibility on the world stage whatsoever any longer. And I think this actually sort of played out only a few weeks after the Suella Braverman public defence of breaking international law, when Dominic Raab, who was then Foreign Secretary, attempted to take a hard line on, fuck me, I can't remember what country it was now, but he attempted to take this sort of, almost presidential stance of something like, they need to really seriously ask themselves some questions if they're comfortable breaking international law. And people like me were reading this shit from Dominic Raab, a key member, certainly at that time, of the Johnson administration, pretending that international law meant something to them only mere fucking weeks after they'd willfully broken international law for their own ends. So, it stands to reason that if you're going to break international agreements like that, you can't rely on them yourself. You can't be seen to be then championing them in a different scenario. It's like, well, which is it? Do you respect international law or do you not respect it and break it at will? So Suella Braverman's been back in the news, and the reason that she's been in the news is not because she's seen the light and seen the error of her ways and she's resigned and said, you know what, that was a bit wild. I got a bit caught up in all the flags and the poppies and shit, and now I see that actually defending that was, it was indefensible, and as a lawyer, I should have probably stuck up for the law. She hasn't done any of that. She's in the news again because the statue in Bristol, the protesters who were then charged and put through the judicial system with the intention of prosecuting them for criminal damage, or ostensibly prosecuting them for being on the wrong side of the culture war, she's come out and said after they've been acquitted, after this jury have listened to their cases and their reasons and their history and all of the contributing factors and the nuances of the case, the jury have reached a verdict and said not guilty. And Suella Braverman, as Attorney General, has stepped in and said, I think people might find this confusing, and I think I need to step in. That's the Attorney General there of the Johnson administration deciding to step in because the law, she feels people might find this confusing. They didn't find breaking international law confusing. That was totally above board. That was fine, not confusing at all. But a jury reaching a verdict well, I might need to step in here and meddle, you know? It's like demonizing juries is now okay. Judges are going to be asked to look at this statute and the case to review whether the jury made the right decision. That's what Suella Braverman is suggesting, is that she's going to ask judges to look at it and review. I like the idea that when judges fuck with Brexit, they're meddling enemies of the people. But when a jury reaches a verdict that sits outside of the parameters of your culture war nonsense, then it's, let's get our esteemed judges to take a look at this. You know, like, you can't demonize judges 1 minute and then ask for their help the next. I don't think it works like that, you know? If you don't respect judges and you say that they're enemies of the state, effectively, and enemies of the people, I don't think you then get to turn around 6 months or a year later or however long it's been and say, yeah, these guys know what they're doing. Like, let's get their thoughts on it. And you can't break international law and then pretend anyone's going to take your opinion seriously on whether the law was interpreted right, like, going forward, right? Like, I mean, are you on fucking glue? If that, like, how can you not see that these two things would conflict, you know? Like, we could marvel at this shit all day. The infant school level rollout of short-termist reward chasing. Just this base level instinct to chase your reward with no consideration for the long-term implications or repercussions. Like, break international law? Sure. Do you think it might trash our credibility, though, when we next need to, you know, reference the fucking law? No, don't worry about that. That is not this. This and now is all I can handle. This moment right now and my goals right in this second. They have the patience and the measured consideration of a fucking heroin addict, don't they? That immediate need for gratification or success in that momentary goal. Like, hey, you know, if you steal your mum's television and sell your vagina, you might unresolvably hate yourself forever. Ugh, I don't care, because that is not this. That is not this. I need this right now. Jack me up. Give daddy his medicine. You know, it's like that immediate need for gratification. I don't know. Do we think Suella Braverman actually cares about a fucking statue? Do we? This is a Cambridge-educated lawyer. This is not like just some, you know, dappy pub bore, culture war, blighty type person. This is a highly educated lawyer. I feel like she's, excuse me, she's sort of playing Boris Johnson's culture war for her own career's sake, you know? That's the vibe I get. Because this smacks of Boris Johnson, doesn't it? I always say Johnson is essentially 3 words. He is symbolism over substance. And as far as Johnson is concerned, that this isn't about the law or the specifics of the law that was broken. It's just the usual Johnsonian bollocks about statues, flags, Britishness, poppies, the Queen, the national anthem. The calculation is that if you talk up symbolism, if you rant about flags and statues in a dock, you can get the Mail and talk radio to belch about that rather than a dodgy number 10 flat refurb and lies about WhatsApp messages and illegal Christmas parties and second jobs and so on. But the trouble is, right, here's my thought on this. The trouble is, it might work initially, again, like in the short term. That's all they understand is short-termist goal chasing. So it might work initially. But here's the issue. People don't like the idea of a load of wokies throwing British history in the river. They don't like that. But they really don't like the idea of being taken for mugs, I would say. Yeah, like out of 100, like, rating, if you rated it out of 100, people hate the woke shit about a 40, I reckon. But being taken for mugs, I reckon that's about a 70 or 80. Nobody likes being taken for a mug. Or almost nobody. Some people are just too stupid to realise that they're being taken for a mug. That's a big thing. But I still think about a 70 or 80 out of 100 hate being taken for mugs. And being like feeling like there's one rule for them and another rule for us, or like the governing party are all a bunch of corrupt arseholes. People fucking hate that shit. That's why the second job stuff blew up so much, and the secret Christmas parties and the rule breaking and Cummings. That stuff lights a fire. It's like, but you know, a statue in the river is like, it upsets some guy in the pub somewhere, and he gets to wave a little Union Jack flag about it. But it's not the same. It's not in the same league, to my mind, anyway. So yeah, like a headline here and a phone in there might serve them well for a day when it comes to like a statue thing. But here's the thing, right? So the broad shitness of being fundamentally corrupt integrity bins is just there. It's just, that's who they are. That's this government. Fundamentally corrupt integrity bins. And they can try and bat it away with like bitty stories about a statue or Prince Harry, like if they want, but it's kind of like it's very piecemeal. It's not enough to get rid of the whole fundamentally corrupt cheating integrity bin thing, because that's who they are. That thing is them and it stays. So it's kind of like them trying to bat it away with these like little stories about a statue or somebody not wearing a poppy, or like, it's like a cheating husband trying to win back some points by criticising his wife's parking. You know? It's like he's done, there's a really bad thing there, like, you know, and then he tries to even the score a little bit, like, yeah, well, can you stop parking like half in and half out, because it's really inconsiderate. His wife's like, oh yeah, well, could you stop lying and cheating on your whole family and spending our rent money on flowers for that fucking whore, and coming home with empty balls trying to pretend that me parking a bit weird is also a very bad thing. So that, like, now we're even Stevens. Fuck yourself, Greg. You know, that's, maybe I'm digging into something there. Maybe I'm projecting or something. That's not my life. Anyway, I'm not a cheating husband, and my name's not Greg. So, but yeah, like, apart from anything else, how weird is it that they're willing to upend and horsefuck British law? Like, this government are willing to dilute and disrespect and effectively jeopardize British law, questioning a jury's decision. Right? That is, we're breaching the perimeter here of what is considered one of the pillars of democracy. When you look at like the separation of church and state, and you look at that the government shouldn't interfere in the judiciary, so separate judiciary, separate government, and I can't remember. I'm sure I'm butchering how those things are defined, but I'm also sure that a government meddling in the judiciary is not cool. And they're willing to let that genie out of the bottle over a clump of iron in Bristol. They don't do shit about so many other things that urgently need the government to step in, maybe into the judiciary. They're like, oh, well, the law's the law. You know, in those situations, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Like donor laws, lobbying laws, first past the post, rape cases, dead fucking refugee children. They could not give a fuck less. So yeah, like they care more about statues at the bottom of a dock than dead kids at the bottom of a channel. That is actually where we're at. That's the priority for the people who are elected to serve us, is a clump of iron over a human being. Like, how fucked is this? If it turned out that iron statues got the vote, like they get to vote in the next general election, wouldn't you be like, yeah, this makes this actually makes perfect sense now. That's why the government have been sticking up for them so much. They're trying to win them over. Get a few extra votes from the statue populace. I don't know. It's a whole... Like, is anyone else so fucking bored of the culture war stuff? It's such a distraction and so boring now. It's like, whenever the government get in hot water about a Christmas party or about lost WhatsApp messages, or something miraculously crops up in the Daily Mail or the Express or, you know, Radio 4 Today, or like something comes up where they're like, well, I just think this tells us that Britain is heading in a very difficult direction, you know? And it's like, does it? Is that really what it tells us? Because what it tells me is that we're not looking at what is actually important. We're not looking at corruption. We're not looking at lies. We're not looking at breaking the ministerial code. We're not looking at the integrity of Parliament. We're not looking at laws that urgently need re-examining. Instead, what we're doing is talking about fucking poppies again, or like whether the proms are going to play Rule Britannia, or, you know, all of this weird, like, Britishy super sovereignty stuff. Like, it's all such a distraction, and it only ever seems to come up when there's actually a serious problem in the news, which I know, look, that makes me sound a little bit tinfoil hat, as though it's like, oh shit, we're in trouble again, quick, wheel out a story about fucking, I don't know, Prince Harry, or like, do you think it's that coordinated? I don't know. I feel like it might be. I don't want to get too conspiracy theorist about it, but I feel like there's someone behind the scenes maybe pulling the strings like that. It's been a weird week for COVID as well. I saw this morning in the news that the army have been brought in to help with the spread of Omicron and treatments of it. And I mean, the army aren't spreading Omicron. They're not like helping with the spread of Omicron. You know what I mean? The army must be fucking exhausted. Like, is this why we withdrew them so haphazardly from Afghanistan? We're like, yeah, all this training and guarding translators that's cute, but we've got some real army work for you guys. And they're like, what's that? Well, you gotta report to Wexham Park Hospital in Slough. Oh God. Imagine that. Like, how is that for a morale booster for exhausted soldiers going to Slough? You come back off tour, having seen your friends blown to pieces, IEDs have got you shaking in your sleep, and you just want to return to normality, and in the time you went away, your country's basically turned into 1930s Germany. The first job they give you when you get back is moving ventilators around a piss-stained corridor in Slough. Fuck my life. They must be exhausted, though. And they get brought in to do all the shitty jobs. Have you noticed that? It's like bringing the army into something is the new Boris Johnson to take personal charge of. You know? It's one of those headlines. It's supposed to make you feel more secure. It's been like, it's been tested with like focus groups, and, you know, they... Oh, excuse me. I'm going to have a quick sip of beer, guys. Excuse me. Hold on. It's one of those headlines they soundboard against people, and they go, would you feel more confident if you heard this sentence? Or would you feel less confident if you heard this one? And then they feed it out to the tabloids. And so when they publish shit like, the Prime Minister will take personal charge of, you're supposed to then feel reassured, I suppose. It doesn't really work for Boris Johnson, because every time he takes personal charge of anything, it ends up in some fucking unholy Tasmanian devil of tomfuckery situation. Seems to descend into chaos at every possible juncture. But yeah, they do see, like, when they publish the headline, army brought in to, or British military brought in to help XYZ. It's like, maybe that's the new one, because the old one doesn't work for Boris Johnson. Maybe this is a new one. It's just occurring to me now. But they do get brought in to do, like, all the shitty jobs. That is inarguably the case. You know, like, if like with Brexit, like, if petrol's running low, bring in the army. COVID testing's stopped because of fucking delays at Dover. We're bringing in the army. Hospital staff shortages now. Bring in the... Like, I love the idea that we put British army personnel in hospital wards. Army guys in hospital wards. And the head nurse would be like, who the fuck are you? The guy would be like, I'm a second lieutenant and these are my 2 cadets here. The head nurse would be like, can you help me save this father of 2's life? And these army guys are like, no, we kill people. That's like the opposite of what you want. Well, why are you here then? I don't know. We just get wheeled into these shitty jobs. Like, I mean, we should get going, really. There's a statue somewhere that we need to SAS parachute into and shoot some protesters and save the statue from them at all costs. Mixing some COVID and some culture war shit there for you guys. Bit of a callback. You're welcome. Maajid Nawaz was in the news yesterday. If you're not familiar with Maajid Nawaz, he was an LBC presenter. I realised I said he was, like, really defined there, like he's just passed away. He's not, as far as I know. I mean, he might be dead as of now. I hope not, because I really hate deleting episodes. I don't... This is getting really dark, I know, but, like, if he did kill himself, and then I've talked about it here, it would kind of half be really bad taste, but also I didn't know that at the time, so it would be kind of cool, like very prescient. Maybe that prescience would be the thing that would propel this podcast into superstardom. So I'd be a fool to do... Anyway, look, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. Maajid Nawaz was he ostensibly got fired yesterday, I think, and that's kind of funny. You know, people call him Maajid like people call Johnson Boris. You know, first name. Like he's their mate. Maajid said this on the weekend. Boris did this the other day. Nobody ever called Theresa May Theresa, did they? Have you noticed that? It's Boris, it's Maajid, but it's not Theresa. This is weird. Probably because, like, literally nobody considered her their friend, I suppose. It's quite the uniter, really, isn't it? In these deeply divided times. Almost every major issue, policy, or scandal, you can cut the polls down the middle like the shit's a fucking alien autopsy. Come out 51 to 49 on basically everything. Unless YouGov did a poll, like, would you like to be Theresa May's friend? And then it would have been almost 100% like, no thanks. Like, unanimous. Family grudges that started 30 years ago could have been bridged from that starting point. Like, do you still hate your brother? Yes, I do. He supports Everton. I support Liverpool. Oh, God. Okay. Do you both at least fancy the same kind of woman? No, he likes Thai women and I like blondes with lipstick. Oh, fuck's sake. Have you got anything in common? Anything that we can start from? Do either of you want to be Theresa May's friend? Fucking no. Let's start from there, guys. Nawaz got let go, or didn't have his contract renewed by LBC, and LBC put out a tweet saying that from immediate effect he'd be gone. And I can't imagine this isn't related to his kind of weird stances on vaccines and lockdowns, and, you know, like he did a few shows, and I only listened to him sparingly, but even I caught a few of his comments and monologues where he was talking about like questioning the sense of lockdown, and I forget if I've heard him really rip into vaccines or question vaccines or anything, but I gather, or at least my understanding is that he is or has expressed vaccine skeptic views and stuff, and I can't imagine that him being let go or falling out with LBC isn't in some way related to it. And I don't think his feeling, like his questioning of lockdowns or his supposed skepticism of vaccines is that weird. I don't think it's that abnormal anymore, you know? Like, it feels a bit weird because he's a broadcaster and he's seen, excuse me, at least historically, as a sort of, you know, he was a Liberal Democrat candidate back in the day. So he's seen as a sort of progressive, left-leaning voice. And so for somebody like him to kind of align himself with something that was traditionally found on the American right, in terms of like the anti-vax movement, it's, you know, it's strange to see him go down that road, isn't it? Like, do you remember when anti-vax movement was genuinely just a sort of fringe group of sibling fuckers on the American right? Like, you'd have to hunt those fuckers down somewhere in a mining town in the middle of bumblefuck nowhere. And now we all know someone who's at least like vaccine skeptic, don't we? We all know at least one person who's kind of bought into that shit. Like, whatever you think of the anti-vax movement, we can all agree, fantastic marketing. Really good at getting people into it. Jehovah's Witnesses must be fucking livid. Like, imagine knocking on doors for 25 years. 25 years, and you get like 3 people interested in your cult that whole time. Some group of rednecks think medicine is the devil's sperm, start a Facebook group, and bam, like 5 years later, half the fucking world's like, yep, I'm a card-carrying pureblood. Fucking outrageous. I'd kill for promo like the anti-vax movement have. Maajid Nawaz, though, is like, he's quite an interesting character. He was radicalized back in the day as a sort of Islamic extremist. He was indoctrinated and he joined this terror group called, I think, his Tahrir, I think, from memory. I no idea if I'm saying that right. His Tahrir or something along those lines. Not one of the big ones, one of the smaller ones. They could do with better branding. And he was arrested and imprisoned in Egypt for like half a decade over his role or his involvement in some sort of terror activity or something. And then he left the group after he got out, excuse me, in 2007, and then he started speaking out about radicalization and the causes of it and how to overcome it. And I've listened to some of his shows in the past, and I found him to be a really intelligent, engaging, and at times witty presenter with a really interesting backstory. Because I'm not Islamic. I come from a very different walk of life to him, and I'm always interested in hearing people's sort of, you know, life story and their background and their experiences. And it's just been since the pandemic that he's just kind of gone down this weird tin hat vaccine skeptic, lockdown skeptic road, and it got me thinking, how dumb do you have to be to get radicalized twice? You know, like wouldn't you know the signs to look out for? Wouldn't you like think, oh shit, I remember when my mates were telling me back in the day, Maajid, you're sounding a bit crazy, mate, going on about global conspiracies and organisations and dark institutions, and like, don't you want to come to the park, Maajid? Just come and kick a ball around, yeah? Come with the rest of us. We're heading down there now. And you just like reposition your foil hat, like, no, I've got to stay in and consume more information about these godless fucking infidels. You know, like, wouldn't you, if you had that reference point, if you recognised that behaviour, that you were going a little bit too deep into something, like, wouldn't you recognise that in yourself the second time? So when people are like, Maajid, do you want to do a phone-in about something else, maybe? You've been going on about this, like, lockdown skeptic shit for quite a while. Like, do you want to come to the pub with the staff for drinks instead or something? You know, no, I want to spread more misinformation and question the logic of locking down when it quite obviously reduces the spread and reduces the likelihood of more variants developing and allows us to track and trace again and is still half as damaging as Brexit. And fuck all that. Let's do another hour of Maajid wants shops open, so fuck your gran. The lines are open. Like, wouldn't you, an outspoken critic of radicalisation and a supporter of de-radicalisation and someone who's walked the walk and talked the talk, wouldn't you recognise the signs in yourself that you're going a little bit off the deep end. I don't know. I mean, I've never been radicalised. So, I mean, other than by Brewdog and vaginas. I mean, I am a radical, unshakable, cult-like lover of vaginas. So it's who am I to judge? Some guys like feet. Some guys are into Thai women. Me, my fetish is firmly vaginas. They work for me, guys. I'm kooky like that. I actually had an interaction with. Sorry, went off on a slightly weird tangent there. Apologies for that. Apologies for those of you who are true blue like political nerds, and then I start talking about vaginas. You're like, what the fuck is this? This. All I'm going to say is that this podcast is not. Oh God, what now? It's not Romaniacs. It's a guy expressing his thoughts about politics sometimes, and yes, I will go off on tangents. Where was I? Maajid Nawaz, right? Yeah, I had an interaction with him one time. He tweeted something at the comedian. What's his name? Tez Elias, I think his name is. No idea what it was. It was some sort of like back and forth between the two of them. And the thing that engaged me, the thing that made me want to tweet back at him, was the fact he referred to this Tez guy as, quote, comedian, right? And I don't mean I'm quoting him saying comedian. I mean he quoted the word comedian. You must have seen people use that as a sort of shit insult. You know, people think they're so smart when they use that. When they see that you're a comedian and then they go, huh, apparently he's a comedian. You know, like they think it's the cleverest thing in the world. And what I said back to him was, I said, look, the grand irony of when like opinionista journalists call a comedian like that, and they think it's like the cleverest thing, is that actually, switch it around, most comedians, when they see that, laugh at the person who's saying it, you know, like, because there's a tragicness to it. It's like, I'm going to say this, and this is really clever. This will cut him down because he thinks he's funny, and if I say comedian, then that'll really show. But it's like, it's so tragic and overdone and not effective. It's, you know, that this individual clearly is a comedian, so you can't say it as a matter of opinion. I better quote him because it's not totally true, so I'll quote that he's a comedian. You know, it's like, there's layers of that to it, but it just doesn't fucking work. It doesn't land. It doesn't cut anyone. It just makes comedians look at you and go, oh God, another one of those, is it? You know? I used to like his show, though. I did. You know, I used to listen to it quite a lot. From the drive from like our old house into Peckham and back again, he would always be on, like, as we were doing drop off, like dropping my then baby boy off at my mother-in-law's for a night or something. And as I say, I found him engaging, intelligent, very articulate. It's just a shame when, I was about to say when you meet people like that, but I've never met him. But when you come across people like that, and you listen to them, and they've obviously got an awful lot to offer to society and to media more specifically, and then they go down this sort of slightly weird rabbit hole, and it's like a loss, isn't it? It's like we've lost an important left-leaning voice here, who will now, let's be real, now he's been fired, he'll probably go on a fucking speech tour about cancel culture, and it'll play more into the right wing of politics. And I suppose that's where the whole anti-woke thing has some, what's the word? So there's some stock in it, in a sense, because by embracing cancel culture, if I can bring myself to say that phrase, what we're doing is we're rejecting as I said, like an articulate, measured, most of the time, or until recently, reasonable voice for the left. We're rejecting that person from the political discourse, And now what are we left with? Like, who's going to take his place as an as like an LBC presenter? Like, LBC is already, I mean, it's pretty, like, it leans right most of the time. You've got James O'Brien, and he's great. And Maajid did some, God, I'm calling him Maajid now. And Maajid Nawaz did some great phone-ins about some, some important topics. Drug use, abortions, and the situation in Israel, and all of that stuff is really great. And it was great to have a left-leaning voice in there. But now who takes that position? Are we poorer as a result of removing him from the political discourse? I don't know the answer to that. And when we get into a conversation about cancel culture, like if he was let go as a result, or if they negotiated his exit between them, as a result of people piling on and saying, like, when are you going to fire Maajid Nawaz because he's preaching all of this blah blah blah, like, is that something that we feel comfortable with if the output of it is that we lose an articulate and at times witty and intelligent left-leaning voice? I don't know, guys. I'm unresolved on this one. I suppose really this comes back to whether you consider cancel culture to be a real thing, or if you see it, as I do, for 90% of the time, as consequence culture. Like if Maajid Nawaz hadn't gone on LBC and started preaching that lockdowns were ineffective, or that, again, I'm not sure exactly what he said about vaccine skepticism and all of that. But if he had been a little bit more, what's the word, responsible with what he was discussing, and less about sort of attracting people to preach their nonsense on his show, then he wouldn't have lost his contract. He would still be on there. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that's not a particularly funny or fun note to leave you on, but that's the end of this episode of A. Thompson and Other Disappointments. I can't speak now. I've run out of words. Here I am talking about other people being articulate and intelligent. I can barely string a fucking sentence together. I'll be back next Friday night with my guest Daniel Whiteson, who's going to be talking to me about teleporting. He's a particle physicist, so that's going to be really interesting. If you like these shows, either the Fuck This Week editions, which is just me talking about the news, or if you enjoy the guests that come on a Friday night, please do like, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment if you really want to be helpful and supportive to the podcast, because it is completely independently produced. It's just me doing this shit. So if you could, amazingly, what would be incredible is if you jumped onto the Patreon, which is patreon.com/AidThompson, or just leave me a review on iTunes, or tweet at me and just let me know that you've listened and what you thought of the podcast. And yeah, I'll catch up with you guys next week for more of A. Thompson and Other Disappointments. Thanks again.